So I've talked about in past videos how a lot of times my colleagues ask for accommodations for their personal life circumstances that I don't seem to be able to do the counterpart of. I have a life too, my colleagues have a life too, their life seems to be a little bit more mainstream, although that might not be the case, as I'll talk about in a second, and they get to ask me for various accommodations, and I don't. And that was a big source of frustration at my last job, which I'm in the process of getting out of. And I read an article online that really highlighted the problem. It made me feel good that at least this didn't happen to me. So one of the big problems is that at a lot of workplaces, there's the idea that you can donate some of your vacation time or your paid time off. It sounds good in principle, and I think the policy probably started with good intentions. Don't get me wrong on that. But over the last few decades of the policy being a little bit more mainstream, it's been twisted to become a very unpleasant situation. So I'm just reading an article about a startup company that had such a policy in place, and one of the employees was needing to take time off to look after their child who was not feeling very well. Now you gotta understand in the climate that we live in, right? 3 years ago, you had a child that was not feeling well, they could stay home alone, and that's good, right? In today's climate, you worry about what the child has. Did they spread it to your colleague? Is that colleague going to bring it into the office? Very different environment, right? 3 years ago, a lot of people would just say, how old is your child? Maybe you can just stay home alone, right? Okay, I understand that. And to be honest, you know, I always, I hate when people talk about how much productivity is being lost from people taking sick time off. I was reading an article one time about how important it is to get vaccinated, even if you don't think you're in a high-risk group, even if none of your associates are in a high-risk group, because if you miss 5 days of work, that hits the GDP by how much, right? When so many people get sick, times how many hours they would have worked. I think it's more of a flu vaccine argument than a COVID vaccine argument, but the same principle holds. And I hate that argument. Let me explain why. Because back in 2018, I had just returned from a conference and I got deathly ill. And I took 3 days off of work. And during my time off, I watched a number of YouTube videos, and I was living out of my car at that point. I checked into an Airbnb for a couple days because I was very ill and out of it. And during that time, I got to network with some people at the Airbnb. This was before the days when if you were ill, nobody wanted to be within 6 feet. It was before those days, right? And so I got to network with some people at the Airbnb. And was that a loss of however many hours I didn't work times how much money I would have made? No! And anyway, but 2022 is a very different environment, right? So they were talking about how the employee in question had asked a number of fellow colleagues if they would donate some vacation time, which is already a can of worms as it is, right? As an employer, if you don't want your sick employees coming in, then don't let them come in, right? It's not a question of who else has some numbers to transfer to you, right? That's a separate matter, right? So anyways, the employees, none of them budged, and what ended up happening was that the employer then posted an Excel sheet of how much, the organization unethically also released an Excel sheet containing the details of how much the vacation time the other employees had left. Now, here's the sad part of that. A lot of people will chime in that this is illegal or whatever the situation is. It turns out it might not be, and here's why. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's studying law, actually. He explained to me that the problem is that it's no secret when your colleague goes away on vacation, right? And it's no secret how many days they get because that's probably part of the employee handbook. And so how many days your fellow colleagues have left is already publicly discoverable information. And so the employer presumably is well within their First Amendment rights to publish that again, right? Because it's already discoverable. So unfortunately, it may not be illegal. But having said that, it gets to the idea of why does one person taking off because of a reason they need to take off. See, I gotta be careful now. I have a new tutoring center that I'm working at, and when I was interviewing with my boss about, I've worked with him on smaller contracts. This is a big contract. When I was interviewing with him, I was kind of listening in between the lines of what he would be accepting of in terms of going away. And here's why. I'm teaching there 4 days every week. But later this summer, I was hoping to take a trip to Phoenix, and that might require me to take off for 2 of those days. And obviously, this is a gig work, and I don't think I could just take a vacation day. But I was thinking, what excuse am I going to give him that he might be understanding of? My first gut reaction was to maybe fake COVID, but then I realized that I don't want my students to be worried about their health. I don't want my boss to worry about potential problems there. And then I thought maybe, because when I was interviewing, he didn't ask to check our vaccination status. I was thinking maybe later this summer when I'm thinking of going to Phoenix, tell my colleagues that I had a bad reaction to one of the vaccines. I'm going to recuperate a little bit. But then I realized that kind of goes against my philosophy. I don't want to have to advertise the vaccines, right, when I don't like them. And as I'm interviewing with him, I thought maybe the best thing was just to say there was a personal matter. Now, having said that, my first week on the job, I felt so good about it that I kind of gave up the idea that I want to go to Phoenix during the summer. So that's good. Maybe I'll go another time when there is more flexibility. But having said that, the fact that we have to listen in between the lines to see what kind of issue that our boss will be approving of is just kind of a sad state of affairs. Now, the other thing that I had to be a little bit more careful about with my boss, I was listening in between the lines the whole time we were interviewing, by the way, to see what kind of religion, what kind of politics he supports. Now, he always talks about my future in the context of having started a family and having children. And he knows that I'm single, but I don't necessarily want to let him know that I'm solosexual just yet. Because I think part of the reason he's been so accommodating to me is that he wants me to be able to go out and mingle with the right people. If he learns that I'm going out to go watch a movie by myself or go to Phoenix by myself, I think I might lose a lot of the accommodation. It's just kind of sad that we have to deal with our bosses in this way, right? I want to live in a world where I can be myself and tell my boss that I'm solosexual and that I want to go to Phoenix by myself because I really enjoyed how people treat me there. Although, if people actually treated people well, I might not even want to go to Phoenix in the first place, right? That's what I'm escaping from, right?